I think we'll start because I'm eager to hear your questions. And so, bonjour tout le monde, Mélanie Robert. Je vais faire ma présentation aujourd'hui en anglais, mais je peux prendre des questions en français. Je peux répéter des concepts en français, donc n'hésitez pas. So, hello, I'm Mélanie Robert. I'll do my presentation in English. There might be some questions. Hi, Elizabeth. In French. Avant de commencer, j'aimerais savoir qui est de l'industrie, qui est du gouvernement. So before, can I get a show of hand? Who's from industry in this room? Okay. Who's from government in this room? Okay. Anybody from academic? No? Okay. Okay, so before I start, I just wanted to tell you who I am. My name is Mélanie Robert. I'm Executive Director of Open Government. And I want to pause there because what I want to tell you today, my message is that there is an openness change that's happening in government and it's real. So I work at the Treasury Board Secretariat of Canada. Maybe you heard me this morning. This is a central agency that really decides on policies. This is the agency that stands between budget, dollars, and the departments actually getting the dollars. And so we're the agency that says yes or no. So pretty powerful kind of traditional agency. Yet they have a director general, that's how we call them, executive director in Treasury Board, whose entire job is to make government more open. So how telling is that they're very serious about getting government to be more open. So what I'll do today is I'll explain to you a little bit what open government is and what is the link with open source, in the hope that it helps you sell open source, open government in your departments. I'll stop at some point and take all your questions. So a bit of a 101, when we talk open government, it's actually been defined by OECD, and they talk about these three big things. It's about increased transparency, increased accountability, and more citizen participation. So those are the three biggies. And now you can interpret them of however you want, sharing more information, including the users in your design, making sure you talk about the financials and that you really report on your progress and that you're honest in the feedback about the impact that you got. For us also, it's a pretty important shift that's happening in government. It's a key government priority. So you may or may not believe in the value of openness, but if you're a public servant, you have to do this. It's now in what we are marching orders as public servant, the ministerial mandate letters. Ministerial mandate letters themselves used to be closed documents that only a few civil servants would see. You know, you would be allowed in a room and then they would be locked and only the ADMs could see them. One of the first things that this government did is they actually published their mandate letters, which shocked every senior civil servant. We thought there would be other hidden mandate letters coming, the real ones, but they never did. These were the real deal. So there's a symbolic thing to actually publishing the mandate letters, but in the mandate letters, it's all about also openness and transparency, and that government and its information should be open by default. That's a pretty big thing. We're really, really far from that. But this is a moonshot, and I agree with it. And we need to start right now to think about how are we eventually going to do our job in an open by default way. And there's a lot of progress that's being made there. So who's involved? Open government is a Canada-wide movement. It's not only the government of Canada. Actually, a lot of the greatest work is done at the municipality level. They're very close to citizens. Our cities know intuitively that you can't do a good program without talking to the citizens because they'll come knocking at your door and tell you that the garbage route doesn't work at all. So they are ahead in terms of the mentality, and a lot of them are doing incredibly good work with their site, giving access to data, but really having the citizens come in. For us in Canada, we have a working group with the provinces, and it's one of the great places where the governments of different jurisdictions work well together. Usually we fight. For open government, we just build off on each other. So it's really positive. We're also doing specific projects with some provinces. For example, with Alberta, we're trying to merge our open data sets and allow for common searches. So if somebody comes, you never know whether your data that you're looking for is at the provincial level, municipal, or the federal, but each of our portal don't speak to each other. So what we're testing right now is a joint search engine that actually can search Alberta's records and Canada's record, whether you're on each site, and come up with these records. So with the hope that one day all of this can be linked and at the touch of a button you can get all the data sets in one place. There's also an Open Data Summit that's coming. It's in Niagara in 2018, so a pretty vibrant place. It is also a global movement. Canada, maybe you heard Olivia this morning, is a member of a multilateral organization called the Open Government Partnership. There's 75 member countries, and this organization forces every member to do action plans every 2 years, and where we commit to opening governments more, and then we're actually reviewed by an independent reviewer. It's horrible. We hate it. But it keeps us honest because we have to report on our accomplishment, and they agree or don't agree. So you have these 79 countries basically every 2 years saying, this is what I'll do to open up my country more. Now, there's some countries that are starting at a more humble level, others that are more advanced, and we all learn from each other in that great movement. What's really special is, although Canada joined in 2012, really right at the beginning of the movement, just recently, last year, we became a member of the steering committee of this member. It's like the Security Council of the UN, if you will. So we now can, really shape the movement. And not only that, but on October 1st, we become the co-chair of that movement. So that's pretty powerful. It means that suddenly we have the power for 1 year to really shape the movement and say we should focus on this. This is what we should prioritize. And so we're working very, very hard to see what are we going to do this year to improve this movement, make it more mainstream, make it more efficient. Some of the 3 priorities we've decided to focus on for our year of co-chairing will be inclusion. So how do we make sure that everybody's included in this OpenGov work? It's very easy to include the usual suspect. It's much harder to go get the people that are not normally at the table, that don't even know they should be involved. So how do we make sure that everybody that has to be included is included? Participation. You saw this was one of the big 3 at the beginning, and we feel we have to push it further. Like, how do we actually get citizens to participate? And this is linked to another higher goal that has the entire movement a bit worried right now. You've all seen it geopolitically, the rise of populism, threats to democracy. Like, our own system is being jeopardized, and you have countries that really actually are saying, we're not sure about this democracy thing, and citizens that are saying, we're not sure about, institutions. There's lots of, trust in institution that's been eroding. And we think that's because a lot of maybe the civil servants or the political class has not been connected enough to the citizens, and in turn the citizens have not been connected enough to their government. They feel disenfranchised. They feel they don't understand these decisions, and they can't participate to it. So participation is very important. It's not only about getting our software right or our programs right. It's also about citizens feeling that they're in a good system and that this is all going to work out. So pretty important. Impact is about, we do all this good work, but is it giving us anything? Open data, for example. We all probably in this room intuitively say, of course we have to release this data. But how can we prove that releasing this data is actually useful and worth the time we spend on it? So we want to focus more on trying to tell the story and start to measure the impact of openness and transparency with data, but also with stories. And that's very important for the open source crowd, for the tech crowd in general. Lots of introverts who do not talk about what they're doing and what it means to the real world, how it affects people. So it's time for us to tell the story with data about the importance of the work we do. So what's the link with open source? I just want to tell you a little story. In 2016, I just arrived to lead the Open Government team. It was in a panic. We were finalizing our 3rd action plan, the 2016 to 2018 plan, and this crazy tornado called Ashley Cassavan came to see me and said, Melanie, we have to have an open source commitment in the plan. And I didn't quite understand what this open source thing was, but she was very convincing. It seemed like a nice thing to do, so I pitched it, and the management at the time kind of went, are you insane? Like, we can't talk, like, that's not a standard, like, no, like, what? And Ashley and I were really chastised, like, it was like, what a crazy idea, like, you guys. 2 years later, it's now a standard. It's a standard. You heard me this morning. It's just 2 years, and now people are asking government, why not, instead of why. So you need to push. Like Ashley and I felt horrible in 2016, but we kept at it, and other people kept at it, and here we are today. So, yeah, power of keep going. In terms of where we're at, so I told you about our enterprise architecture kind of standard that forces pretty much everybody to explain if they're not doing it. But there's also other countries around the world that are using a lot of open source in their OpenGov platform and have really embraced it and are pushing it. We have the D7 countries, of course, that are really trying to push this. So it's also becoming a global movement. You know this already, those of you that are in open source. But for those not in open source, it's worth mentioning that this is not just something that's happening out here. It is a global thing. It has been. What's in place right now? You need to know that our open.canada.ca website is an open source website. So a lot of you here are government officials trying maybe to convince your bosses to do this, or you yourself not sure. This is a pretty big, important website. It's releasing every month proactive information that is legislatively mandated. That means that if we don't publish it, we can have someone sue us, right? They can take us to court. So that's pretty important. So you don't build something like that on a platform or on a system that you don't believe in. So that's a key thing to tell to your bosses if they're wondering about, how serious the government is. And there's other open source platforms within the government of Canada. We are, Canada, also recognized now internationally for our open data efforts. Just recently, we were named #1 in the world, just with the UK. We started FORT about 2 or 3 years ago, and we pushed to #1. And what's really interesting about what the Open Data Barometer said is that the slow and steady efforts of Canada are starting to pay off. And that's what I say also to my international colleagues. We're not a flashy crowd. We're not a flashy country. But, we do slow, steady work. We build. We think about the plumbing. We think long-term, and it pays off. So all that work is paying off. And there's a real nice connection between open data and open source. So that's Canada being #1, 76 points. And we're ahead of a lot of pretty cutting-edge countries. Oh, and by the way, the U.S. has come down on that front because of the less transparency of their data. So if we're all about being open and transparent and open source is growing, what are the issues? I talked about them a little bit this morning. But I want to talk about them again here, and this is where I'll actually stop and ask you to weigh in, either on the problems or on the solutions. So for me, as a manager of an open source platform, it is very, very difficult to find the resources to actually manage this. We're on Drupal and CCAN. There's actually very few people that know this. They maybe prefer jobs in the private sector. I think we're going to have to think about a different solution. One of the ideas I have, and maybe I want to talk to some of you guys out there in the industry, is could we not do some kind of reverse internships here and there? So, the open source community in the private sector looks at government and thinks, this is such a weird place. I don't know that I'll ever understand it. I don't know how to do my pitches. So what if you had a coder come and work with us for a few months? They know the coding, but they don't know government. We could teach them government. And then have our early coders actually go and work with you to learn more about coding, because you're usually more cutting edge than us. So we have to start about hybrid ways to really up the ante. And we don't want to steal from the open source industry because it's nascent and we want it to grow. So we've got to work together and not steal off of each other. So just a thought, but I'd love to hear you on that, on your challenges and your solutions. On risks, lots of perceptions still that this is less secure. So people that say we think it's more secure and we have the proof to do it, how do we make this argument to our upper echelon? They just don't, they feel it's more transparent, therefore more risky. So how do we make that argument? The legal risk, who's responsible for that code? If you picked it up from someone else, is it your code? Is someone else responsible? So legal risks. And just basically feeling less in control. And it's also, I guess the agile also, this is waterfall thing comes in here, but lots of perception that this is something that you control less than a traditional thing that you can just buy and you're not responsible for it. And then there's change. This is really a different way to do things. It feels very new and untested. So how do we show, again, our upper echelon that it's been tested, it's been done, it is being done, and we can actually change, and this is good change. So I want to hear you on that. I think I'm going to stop right now very early, and I'm going to ask you to ask me questions, but I'm particularly interested in your views on the challenges. I'd like this to be interactive. So come to the mic, please, with your either your questions or your thoughts for the audience on these three things. So we can discuss this a little bit, and then if you have more general questions, we can get to the general questions as well.
Hi, my name is this on?
Yeah, I think so.
I'm Glenn Hicks from Agriculture, Agri-Food Canada. I'm in enterprise architecture. And I'm wondering about traditional government departments, organization hierarchies. And me personally, I'm thinking they're not very conducive to this. I came up through application development, and basically everyone's got their goals for the year, their projects for the year, beginning and end project, managers, performance agreement, director, DG. I'm covering my butt. I'm looking out for number one. And when I look at things like this, one of the challenges I think we'll have, but feel free to disagree with me, correct me, tell me how it'll change, is that traditional department organization structures are not very conducive to this. It's sort of like something that will benefit everybody.
Yes.
And I think it's going to be a challenge where we are.
Yes.
There's another point I was going to make about Conway's Law. It's the second time I've seen a reference how software reflects the organization structures of the organization that build it.
Yes.
And again, I come back to the silos of DGs, directors, managers in an organization, in a silo. Yeah, I hate to say it, but you know, they have to deliver on what they're expected. And it's kind of not selfish, but it's the system we're in. So how, I guess just comment on that. I'll leave it at that. Okay?
I'd love, and this is why I love, like, open source is one aspect of open government, but a lot of the challenges of open source are pretty similar to OpenGov. And what you're mentioning is something we're experiencing also in the broader OpenGov world, which is, you know, when you start to collaborate and have citizen or user participation, you're not in control anymore of the outcome. And you have a bunch of people that worked really hard to get to the level they are to make the decisions. And now you're telling them that, you know, we don't really know where this is going to land because we're going to need to ask the users and we're going to build off of something. And that's very, very scary. So open source and OpenGov is part of a broader kind of change that all of government has to get comfortable with, that some decisions are not going to be top-down and really shouldn't be. And some of them are getting it, especially I say those that have a gun to their head and realize just quickly they don't have the solution, and suddenly they look at you and go, help me here. So it's about power. And so I think, again, we have to address this head on and talk about what are the things that will control and that you will still control, even though, yes, this means to let go a little bit about the power. It's also about accountability. When we become executives in the government of Canada, like you're given the Riot Act, like you are accountable, which means your head rolls if something, like some of you would, you know, talk about Phoenix and not sure. But anyway, that's what we're told. That's what we're told, and a lot of us take this very seriously. We are accountable. What do you mean you're like taking someone else's thing? Like they're not from my team. Like I can't be accountable for this like guy over there and their work. So what is accountability in open source? How do we do that? So you guys that are like trying to get things done and code shouldn't have to worry about that, but there's a policy portion, there's policy people that should help you define this and explain this. And we're working hard on these bigger issues of power and accountability. So that's like kind of theoretical. Concretely, I think one of the very positive things that happen is Alex Benet, the CIO, is asking that the CIOs now sit at the DM's table. That's pretty powerful. He's saying that these techie people, they actually need to know everything that's happening in the department, and they need to be able to weigh in and say, and give their ideas and maybe change things. And that's just starting. But as this gets implemented, and I can see Alex himself as he is being included at the Treasury board, for example, and he is influencing decisions, it's going to be pretty powerful. Because suddenly, sometimes the IT, the coders will have solutions that the policy people never even thought about. And I'm hoping you're not going to be afraid to do that. And I was the first one to say, business first, technology second. You know what? We have some pretty convoluted process right now where maybe technology actually can really kind of scrap everything and say, why don't you do it this way? So if you can help the community, the policy, the service people that your systems serve understand that they need to talk to you about their problems and that you may have different solutions than the one they come up, that's going to be transformational. So.
Thanks. I'll try to pull a few ideas that I've heard together into the form of a question.
Okay.
So this morning, I work for Natural Resources Canada in the Canada Centre for Mapping and Earth Observation.
Yes.
And we've been promoting open standards and open geospatial information for many years now.
Yes.
And so this morning I heard Dr. Fielding talking about this virtuous cycle of open standards, open source, and open architecture. And so the thing is that a lot of government's relationship with people is through communications mechanisms, and the web is the mechanism that is vendor independent so far.
Yeah.
Through, I don't know how it's managed to last that long, but I think it's under threat. And so is there, I know it's under threat through proprietary forces. And so is there a perception at the executive level that the web is so important as a medium of communication of government to people? And secondly, it's based on standards, and is there a notion of, like speaking of open source, is there a notion of supporting the web, open standards, and the open source browser ecosystem?
Yes. That's a great question. First of all, I want to say how I love NRCan, because yes, these people were at the forefront of we talk about open data as if it just started, but these guys have been doing it, and again, it's about long plumbing, meticulous work that's paying off, and we're always bragging about the work of NRCan. So anyway, I love NRCan. That's a huge problem, and I think yes, senior echelon is very seized with the importance of the web and social media and fake news, and how this is actually threatening our government, our institutions, and our democracy. So senior echelon is having a oh shit moment, really. What they're just starting to realize is that connection you're making, that there are standards for these websites, and maybe there's a way for us to do something, or maybe we can protect something. So there's just that awakening about the importance of these technical things that they discarded before, that was just plumbing. So you have all these higher-ups that are really worried, seeing this thing kind of free, and really trying to come up with solutions, especially there's an election coming, this is serious stuff. They just don't know yet how to actually use their power to influence those things. There's a big disconnect between the people that know the technology and the standards and the upper echelon, so few of them who are actually trained in technology. So that's a bit of the problem. So what we'll have to do, it's a big problem, but at least you have awareness. Oh my God, we need these guys. We have to teach the higher ups to talk to the technical people and understand what they can do and what are the threats. We also have to teach the technical crowds to speak to higher ups in ways that resonate with them. And if they need an interpreter, I'm an interpreter. I'm an in-between. I'm not super tech. I'm not super high. I love doing that because it's like it's a need. So think about your role. Who are you? Like, are you the tech person that fixes things? Are you the interpreter to senior management? Like, who do you want to be? Who are you?
Hello, how are
Hello.
you? This topic is very close to our heart. I'm with Red Hat Canada. I manage Canada as a division from the U.S. And the government has been using a lot of our solutions over the last several years. In fact, Mike Carthy this afternoon at 2 o'clock at this room is going to talk about the changes, which is a cultural change that needs to take place. So who wants to hear Mike talking, he's going to be here at 2 o'clock. But from a people, how to get across the learning curve of moving into the open source world, I think the Innovation Lab for us has been a very good solution for many of our customers. Yeah. So we go on site, we create an Innovation Lab, bring the top people of our place, top people of your place, we educate you over an 8-week period, and then you're up and running. That's been very efficient, very good. We've used this in several government entities across the country to get you across. And there's also some colleges, for example, Seneca College in Toronto has an open source program of 2,500 students that you guys can go and recruit from there to bring them into early stage of their career. And they come from all over the world. It's a very good program that they have. I know there's other universities and colleges, but I know this one in particular because I was
Can you repeat the name again?
Seneca College.
Seneca,
From a risk perspective, we are a $3.5 billion company, the largest open source company ever. We're the first one that hit $1 billion 5 years ago. And from a risk, we haven't had a customer that lost their job because of open source ever. We haven't had any breach that were substantial, that people were lost data. The difference between open source, I think the code that exists in the community, be careful. If it's not supported by an enterprise company like Red Hat, then you're at risk. So downloading code is risky, definitely, because the code, same thing as your developer in the office, do the code and you release the code to be a production when it's half done. Same thing. Don't take codes from the community that is not supported or guarantee support by a company like Red Hat, where we have 14,000 people, half of our staff is engineers to support that technology. Not only that, we also invest a lot in the community. We spend about $500 million in R&D, and half of that money goes into the community to support projects. So things that you guys are going to invent or come up with the code goes in the community, we're potentially going to pick that up and invest people, headcount, and resources to get the code to accelerate the development to make sure it goes in prime stream faster and earlier. We have, I see on your notebook there, you have some of our logo that we're supporting, Origin, Red Hat Linux, and Ansible, automation tools, and so forth. So there's a lot of good solution out there. Just be careful what you download and use.
So I'm going to agree and disagree with what you said. So I think what you're saying is that there is support for those of you and for those types of applications that require that type of support. And that's fair. I don't think everybody necessarily needs that. But it's very important to come at your project with eyes wide open. What am I talking about? Am I playing with pensions or salary system, or like what is this thing? And do I need professional help? And I know Monia is here too. We have the same approach for open data. A lot of you kind of publish on your own open data. Now StatsCan is having a kind of a service that they're testing where they're like, let us help you. If your data is really important and key, we can help you. So I think this is very beneficial that there's different types of model depending on your needs. And we want to be careful. We don't want to do something that's just going to wreck it for all of us. You said something about Innovation Lab. I really like that. On the people side also, and to get any project accepted, there's an openness right now with pilots, with testing. There's a craving for your DM to say that he's been testing and piloting something. So start like that. If you're not able to actually sell the entire project, we're just going to test. We're just going to innovate. We're just going to experiment somewhere. That's a nice way to start and get things started. So there was another question, but okay, yes. How much time do you have? A minute. Last question.
Oh, I have to be short. So my name is Jillian. I work at Health Canada. I work on the business side. And I was really struck by something was said this morning about we have to be humble and say when we don't really know the answers. And this year I had to go to EC for an investment project for a mandate priority, a regulatory priority, to kind of say, look, the clock is ticking. We don't have a lot of time, but I have an idea how we can do this fast. how we can meet the timelines of the regs coming into force. It's called open source. So the executive table was like, what's she talking about? And I had to convince them that I wasn't going to do a full options analysis. I wasn't going to do a business case, even though technically I have to because Treasury Board says so, and that I just needed a little time and a little bit of money and I would build a prototype. So 7 sprints later, we're going into production, everything is awesome, meeting the timelines of the regulations, but it took me sticking my neck out, which felt like potentially a career-limiting move, and them having the courage to say, you know, yes, we are going to figure a way to work through this governance so we can still be accountable, so we can start developing before we're in stage 4 of investment planning, and we're all going to hold hands and hope we're okay. But it took a lot of convincing, and I think senior management, they're trying to govern well, but the structures around our governance don't necessarily allow us to work in the way we need to work. And then finally when they said yes, I was like, holy shit, now we got to find a developer who's going to work for us, an open source developer. So then it was like, okay, let's look at all the contracting vehicles and see who we can entice to work for us because this is such a cool mandate. Yes. So there are challenges in the governance, there are challenges bringing right people in the door, and one of the things that I would like to see is to reduce the risk in decision making by creating an enabling framework, and by looking at our practices around recruiting and talent management, so that we're able to execute in a way that embraces open first.
Thank you, and congratulations on your persistence. There is such a thing called an open source advisory board, and some of the members are here. And the role of the Open Source Advisory Board is really that, to create an enabling, how did you say it, an enabling framework to make this happen. But you need to call us out, TBS, when we're standing in the way. If our own policies in some weird ways are preventing you to do your job, this is the time. We're actually open to criticism right now. Whoa. So use that. But also, you know, sticking your neck out. There's a community, and social media is probably the best way to find it, but there's other people like you that are trying or have tried. And I'm in the world of OpenGov. I need to convince people all the time, and sometimes I need to go back to the community to kind of get, you know, a tap on the shoulder and say, okay, you're doing because you get a lot of no's and a lot of closed doors, so we have to help each other out and build that community. The third thing I would say is when you make it, like you did, tell your story, which you just did, but we got to make you tell your story. You got to come to our GCEARB and tell your success story so that others don't have to go through what you have to go through. So thanks a lot for sharing that story. Oh, well, you're going to make it. Help her out. Merci beaucoup tout le monde. Merci.